Hey everyone, let's give it just a minute or so, and then we'll get started with the webinar. Tage, just a mic check. Can you hear me? Okay, cool. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to our Wave 11 webinar. This is an extremely special session for us as a company, as we've launched a new wave of features, and also we have a pretty exciting announcement to make that some of you may already be aware of. With us today, we also have Gina Wang and Andrew Zhao, two of our deployed engineers here at Windsurf, who will be showcasing some of the features that we've recently added to the product. So our agenda today will include a brief overview of Windsurf. We'll discuss this surprising announcement, and then we'll go into showcasing some of the features. And if we have time, we'll leave some time for Q&A. And also, feel free to leave any questions in the Q&A box below as well. So for those who are new to us, Windsurf is the first agentic IDE powered by our agent, Cascade, which has the ability to search and analyze your whole code base. It can edit your code. It can also call different tools, and it does so in a much more multi-step and also takes in a lot of reasoning actions as well before it executes those tasks. But before we actually talk too much about Cascade and showcase some of the latest features in the product, I have some news for everybody. Surprise, surprise, Windsurf is now a part of Cognition, who are the founders and creators of Devin, which for those who are not familiar, Devin was the first fully autonomous agent. And so briefly, let's take a look at the difference between Windsurf and Devin, because some people may think that, oh, wait, Windsurf was also a coding agent as well, right? So the difference is Windsurf runs locally, right? It's an IDE, so it runs on your machine. So it gives you that very fast, responsive, agentic interface, mainly for very tight feedback loops and a lot more interactivity and a lot more control. And so it's really built for that speed and for you as a user to control that experience, right? Devin, on the other hand, it runs in the cloud. So you can spin up multiple Devin agents and they can run in parallel, and they can handle a lot of these large scale tasks like testing, like migrations, PR reviews, and just general triage, right? And the thing is, they can all run asynchronously. So you can work on other things in the Windsurf editor, and they can also run at scale. So together, you can imagine, right? Windsurf can be really leveraged for high leverage thinking and iteration, while Devin takes on a lot more of that repeatable and parallelizable work. So having Devin work hand in hand with Windsurf now creates a powerful flywheel. If you could move to the next slide, Gina. And this just opens up a ton of possibilities, right? As a Windsurf user, you can imagine now in the future, you may be able to scope and brainstorm in Windsurf, or with Devin's DeepWiki, which, by the way, for those who have not tried DeepWiki, it's another one of Cognition's great tools that they've built to really help you understand your code base. And then from that understanding, you can assign different work streams to multiple Devins to run in parallel, right? And then you can, while it's making those edits, you can stay in the loop in Windsurf while Devin is adapting and it's learning from those changes. And then you can also simultaneously hand off more tasks, more tedious or repeatable tasks directly from Windsurf to Devin. So the possibilities here are endless. And you can just imagine how much this would augment the experience if you're able to utilize both of these in tandem. So for those of you who haven't tried Devin or DeepWiki, I would highly recommend giving them a shot and seeing what you're able to build. And overall, we're just extremely excited to work with Cognition's world-class team and help bring the future of software development to all of our users. But before we move on to wave 11, Gina, if you could go to the next slide, let's take a step back and look at how far we've come since our launch in November. Ever since we pioneered this agentic IDE, right, back in November, we've only pushed the frontier of the space. With every wave, with every feature that we've launched, we have oftentimes been the first to market with a lot of these features. And we are only continuing this trajectory, right? And we're nowhere close to being done. Last week, we launched our latest set of features, Wave 11. And now I'll hand it off to Gina, who will showcase some of these latest updates.
Awesome. So thank you, Sean. Now I'm going to dive in a little bit more about our main topic today, which is Wave 11. So as similar to the previous waves, Wave 11, we carried out a lot of different features. So we have the global workflows, we have name checkpoints, and mention, et cetera, a lot more of these. Um, Obviously, with the time we have today, we won't be able to cover every one of these, but we will for sure showcase some few highlights we have out of all of these. And the first thing I want to showcase here is our browser, so the Windsurf browser and its enhanced integration into the Windsurf IDE. So, as some of you may recall, last wave, which is wave 10, we shipped out our own browser, the Windsurf browser. And that is because that as developers ourselves, we understand that a lot of time you spend developing and engineering, you actually spend that time outside of your repository. And that's just because there's so much information that resides outside of your repository that you have to go fetch, you have to learn from, and also read. That's essentially why we brought forward a whole new surface, the Windsurf browser for our developers, and now we also enhanced its integration into the Windsurf IDE. So our goal here, not only here, but also overarchingly, is to support our developers not only within the IDE when you're developing, but also outside of your IDE and throughout the entire SDLC. We want to keep on reducing different fractions wherever you are and also bring you a magical developing experience. Now, with that, I kind of do want to head into the browser. So here you can see my Windsurf IDE. This is a just like a standard Windsurf IDE that you can see on my screen right now. The right-hand side is the Cascade panel. And you can see right here, if you click on this, there's the option to launch the browser. So I'm just going to click on that. And then surely we can see the browser on my screen here launched. Now, using the Windsurf browser, Cascade, which is our agentic assistant here, now has direct access to a lot more information in the browser. So first of all, it can see a lot of you can see all the tabs that you have open. For example, if I pull up Windsurf's official website here, then Cascade now has information on both of the tabs. And then it also acknowledges that you have different tabs open in your browser. Now, it also has access to your entire fully rendered page from HTML, the text, the backend script, and also the metadata. So things like this. And then, in addition to that, it also can access the entire DOM tree that you have, including the elements and also the console logs that it has right over here. Now, all of that are a lot of information now you can directly access via Cascade, but on top of that, you can also actively take actions in the browser that will get sent to Cascade directly. So right in this corner, you can see that we have the option of sending this page to Cascade or sending a certain element to Cascade directly. There also is the option of sending logs and take a screenshot. And any of these action is essentially you sending information on this browser directly to Cascade. So not only can we do all of these and can Cascade access all of these information on your own website when you're doing development, but it can also access all sorts of the information regardless of what website I pull up. For example, if I go to the Windsurf browser, it can do that. If I pull up GitHub, Anthropic, etc., it can always fetch the same information. You can take the same actions on these websites. So essentially, we gave Cascade a new set of eyes, is what we're doing here. And the possibility here are really just limitless. Um, Imagine that you can just debug with a few clicks. There's no more copy pasting, screenshotting needed. And more of all, if you come across another website that you just like really like the design, you really like the style, now Cascade can see that too. So no more telling Cascade what you really mean, and just like pull that in and Cascade can see for itself. So that's a lot of talk, and let's just see how Windsurf works exactly. So actually have a repo pulled up here. This is a full stack web application with the front end and a back end powered by Fast API. Front end is where we're going to focus in this section. I'm just going to quickly navigate into the folder and start our front end server so we can see it in action. Um, so I'm going to pull that up in our localhost, and surely we have our application rendered here. So this is our start point, and say that I don't really love the interface I'm seeing right now, and I kind of do want to reduce the padding of this thing here. So traditionally, I just go ahead and then screenshot this whole element and try my best to kind of like describe exactly what I want to do. To Cascade, and hopefully it gets an idea of what that means. But chances are any agent that's going to infer what you're trying to do is going to misunderstand your intent and go ahead and do something that you don't really want. So instead of that, I can actually just go ahead and select the element right here. And then with that, we can see that Cascade actually has direct access of that element that's getting passed in right here. And then it now already knows which element we mean on the DOM. So with that, I can just say that reduce the padding of this element. And just to be extra cautious here, want to do that of this element, make sure you fetch the correct element. Now I don't have to do that, but personally like to give it a little bit more specific direction when it comes to these sort of actions. So Cascade is going to go ahead and then continue its regular course of actions, fetching information, analyzing, and then eventually carrying out the change that we wanted to execute. Awesome. So you can see that in a short period of time, it already found which exact element that I want to make changes to. And then it also acknowledged that we actually have multiple instances of this class, and go ahead and then found the specific padding that I want to change and now edited the element correctly. So can see surely that the padding has been reduced. It's slightly hard to see, but I can further adjust this or give it more specific instructions however I want. But the gist here is by specifying an element, you no longer need to rely on the model to refer to infer what your intent is right over here. So that's a quick showcase of how you can specify elements on Cascade and send information over. But I also do want to point out something that I mentioned earlier before is that Cascade has access to your console logs. So regardless if it's a warning, if it's an error, if it's a regular networking message, etc., all of that Cascade will be able to see. And just imagine this function in a third-party service that your app is connected to, for example, like the Sentry data logs or the AWS console. Normally, you'd have to try your best to tell Cascade or copy paste a lot of times to describe what's happening over there. But now Cascade can directly go in, fetch the logs, and then it will know exactly what's happening in these outside services. So that's another thing I want to point out. Now, lastly, there's a really cool thing that you can do with browsers and the Windsurf ID integration. But before that, I do want to showcase another feature that we have, which is the support of the streamable HTTP and OAuth MCP servers. So right here, we can see that we have the NCP server plugin store. And essentially, what the support means is that regularly you'd have to go ahead, download the MCP server and do some configurations. But now, simply with a few clicks, you will have your MCP server set up. So I'm just going to go ahead and then choose the Atlassian MCP server here and just download. We'll give it a little bit of time to run, but we'll be able to see that with a few clicks, it's now successfully installed. And if we go back to Cascade, we go to the MCP server here, we can see it's correctly configured right over here. I didn't do any configurations manually. It just simply is set there. But let's go ahead and verify whether it's working correctly and whether it connected to my account or not. So I'm just going to go ahead and then get my Jira tickets. So once Cascade acknowledge what's gonna do, it will go ahead and connect to the MCP server. And since this connection is established, we can prove that our authentication is actually successful without me doing anything. So that is a much quicker workflow versus how it was before in a lot of different services. So we can see here that I actually have a ticket which tells me to change the background color to something lighter. And yeah, I agree with that. Like probably something lighter would be different vibes. So, but it's also a very vague ticket. So what do you mean by something light? Then perhaps let me just go ahead and then get some inspiration from the Windsurf website. Okay, well, the sand background here is a pretty decent color, and I think it would look well in our background app, right? So I'm just gonna go ahead and then change the background to this color. Now, normally, how would I do that? I'd probably go ahead and then use some ways to like figure out the color myself and then tell Cascade to change that into that color, or I'll take a screenshot, right? But now you don't have to do that anymore. The last thing about browser that's really cool is that you can directly chat with your tabs now in Cascade. And by that, I mean you can directly mention all your browser tabs here directly in Cascade, and Cascade will know which tab you're referring to. So let me go ahead and do that. I'm going to tell Cascade that I want to change the background app of this web page into the background color of this web page. Let me just go ahead and do that. So change the background color of the React website. So with, actually I'm gonna do the browser. So this is a much clearer kind of thing. If you click on browser, there's a lot of things that you can refer to. I'm actually gonna change the prompt. I didn't see that, change the color of my app here. Let me refresh real quick just to see that it popped up in the browser tab, and surely enough, it's right there. So change my React app into the background color of the Windsurf tab right here. So gonna mention that and then pull up the web page, whichever works. And then Cascade will be able to know what exactly I'm referencing to. Go ahead, take whatever actions. For example, it's taking a screenshot right now to acknowledge what exactly I want to do and then fetch information directly from the browser. And in a little bit, we'll be able to see that Cascade actually successfully go ahead, carry out the changes after a series of analysis. So this is just a brief showcase of how directly integrated the browser and the IDE is and how much back and forth that already saved me. So we'll give it some time to run. It's editing right now, and perhaps go ahead and check that out. Awesome. So it's going to go ahead and make some other changes. We're just going to wait for it to kind of finalize here and then check it out. And the good thing about working with Cascade and Windsurf in general is that it's a really intuitive flow for you to always step into Cascade if you want to, and really emphasize on the concept of working alongside Cascade. So if it's not the direction you want to do, simply just point that back to the direction you want Cascade to go into, and that's perfectly fine. So seems like Cascade has already wrapped up the migration, or slight change of background, and sure enough, when we head back to the browser, it's already the sand color that I see over here. So obviously that probably needs a little bit of working, but the gist here is now with the browser, whatever you see, Cascade also has it too. So you can debug and upgrade your website directly just with a few clicks and also a prompt. You can connect and pull directly from your connected services like Sentry Data Logs and AWS Council. And also, you can just simply pull up any website, and then your focus now is no longer the heavy lifting, the coding, but rather getting the inspiration, getting the ideas, and just play around with them. So with browser now, you can just imagine all you want. And with that, I'll pass it to Andrew for our next part of the demo. And I'll stop screen sharing there for Andrew. Um,
1 second, let me start sharing. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Gina, for going over some of our browser integrations. I'm going to talk a bit more about the other features that we've integrated into Windsurf within Wave 11. The first of which is voice. This is a relatively straightforward explanation, but you can now speak directly to Cascade. You no longer just have to type out your prompts, you can now talk to Cascade. We'll explore a bit more about sort of the thought process behind why we create a feature like this, but that is one of the developments that we've made within Wave 11. And I do want to note some of the other features that we've made are at mentioning of terminals and past conversations. As always, we want to improve the amount of ways that you can interact with Cascade to add sort of the context that you want Cascade to specifically take in within your prompts. And there isn't too much to say here on this slide, so I'm just going to switch over to the Cascade window and just show you guys. So first here, this is a Cascade window, just like Gina had showed before. You have the same repository loaded up. And right here, I want to note this is the voice mode that we have integrated with Wave 11. Right here, we can just hit start recording and we'll be able to give Cascade a prompt. So let's go ahead and give Cascade that prompt. Let's create a plan to build out a feature that lets users choose different AI voices in the voice chat web app, use the Cartesia API, choose the first 6 voices that you find, create a button group for these 6 voices, have each button have each voice's name, and also add in that if you hover over each button, it should list out a description of the voice while also giving a preview of the voice as well. Let's have the preview say, "Hi there, it's nice to meet you." Great. So I've given Cascade sort of this pretty long, drawn-out prompt, and that's sort of why we created a feature like this, is because we understand that sometimes as your prompts become more complex, it does become more tedious to type out these prompts and can be an easier interface of just being able to speak out what you want Cascade to do. And so here we've given Cascade a pretty complex prompt in the sense that we've added a bunch of different specifications that we want Cascade to have. And before I run this, I do want to note one more feature that we've added is this planning mode. We add this planning mode in Wave 10, and I'll talk a bit more about what it does, but the difference that we've made in Wave 11 is that we've now simply toggled it on automatically. Of course, you can still toggle it off, but the reason why we toggled it on is just because we've seen such great adoption of it, and we want to make sure that all of our users are leveraging it as much as they can. So I'm going to go ahead and run this, and it'll be able to create this plan based on the voice prompt that I gave it. Of course, to talk a bit more about planning mode, again, the whole reason why we developed something like planning mode is because we saw a lot of our developers creating these markdown files to go ahead and sort of put in the specifications that they want Cascade to follow, the set of tasks that they want Cascade to follow. And we're seeing really good results from Cascade through referencing this markdown file. And we saw that, and we were like, we should create a feature to automate that process. And that's kind of where plan mode comes from. This way, when Cascade now, or when you give Cascade a plan, Cascade is able to sort of reference this plan as a source of truth as it takes on these longer, complex tasks. So it won't really go down those rabbit holes that you don't want Cascade to go down. Again, the name of the game here is just to have Cascade be able to handle more tasks autonomously and sort of front load this planning process where you're now having, or front load that sort of human interaction where you're having this section of your workflow where you are now working with Cascade to create this plan and then iterating through that plan and then having Cascade go and run that plan. Great. So Cascade has run through and actually started carrying out this plan. So one thing I'll note is that this is a pretty complex plan. It's got a lot of steps going for it. And one thing I do want to add in is a new feature that we created, which is auto continue. Of course, there is a tool call limit to each prompt that you have, but we understand that, again, we want Cascade to be more autonomous. And that right there can be done through auto continue, which is before you had, when Cascade hit that 20 tool call limit, you would have to then go ahead and prompt Cascade to continue. Now we've gone ahead, you can open the Windsurf settings, and right here within Cascade, scroll down and you'll see auto continue. I already have it toggled, but when this is enabled, Cascade will go ahead and automatically hit continue when it hits that limit, that tool call limit. Great. So Cascade has gone ahead and created some of this. While this runs, I'm going to go ahead and talk about some of the other features that we added in as well. So the first of those, or I guess generally, I think, like I mentioned before, we were thinking about different ways that we wanted to add or allow users to add in more context. And there are two main ways where we felt that, or I guess three, but there are a few ways that we felt that Cascade should be able to access more context. And the first of those is just going to be @mention the terminal. Now you can @mention the terminal, just @terminal. And we don't have any terminals open right now. And it's able to actually pull out the terminals that we have now. But you see, you can choose whichever terminal that you want to reference and then be able to @mention those directly. Another piece or another feature that we've added as well is being able to @mention conversations. So let's look at our conversations. We have a bunch of different past conversations that we have. Let's say I want to reference these Python tests that I ran before, and now I can directly access and mention this conversation and tell Cascade, look at the test run coverage, improve the test coverage by writing more tests. And now Cascade will be able to then go ahead and reference the previous conversation and look at all the specific context that it needs to pull out. You can see here, it was able to search the conversation, and you can even open the conversation to reference that as well. And sort of the last feature that I want to show in terms of adding more context is we've also enabled or had a feature where you can enable start with history. What this does is when you toggle it on and you give it a prompt, I'm going to give it a relatively arbitrary prompt, but run this web app. You can now see that we have a recent chat history. And what this does is it's able to then go ahead and sort of reference the past chat history the recent past chat history that you've had. And you can see exactly what's being run within this tab right here. And sort of what this does is able to take in any sort of recent code changes that you've made, any sort of different any sort of the recent conversations that you had with Cascade, the code that Cascade has put out as well. And it's able to take all that recent history into account when you're starting a new conversation. Again, where you find that is once you hit a start a new conversation, right next to the planning mode and voice mode buttons, you'll see the start with history. So these are sort of the different features that we've added where you're able to add in more context. Right, there's a lot of features that we've added, but there's actually one more I do want to talk about, and that's going to be sort of being able to add checkpoints or snapshots within your conversations. So as developers, we use Git a lot to sort of commit the progress that we've made and sort of checkpoint all the progress that we have. But we've noticed that as we use and leverage these AI tools, agent AI coding tools more, there's a lot more changes that we're making that you might not necessarily commit. So this process of checkpointing, we wanted to simplify, and we can look at how we've done that. Just look through some of our old conversations. And I have this old conversation pulled up. And one way you can add, or the ways that you can add a snapshot is after each response that Cascade is given, you can go ahead and hit create a snapshot right here down in the bottom right. All you need to do is hit that button and you can describe the snapshot. Right here, we had Cascade implement a certain feature. So we're just going to tell implemented WebSocket improvements. And now we've created a snapshot, and you can see here on the table of contents that we have the snapshot right there. So this is just an easier way to sort of checkpoint the progress that you've made with Cascade. As you can see, I've added some other checkpoints along the way. We explored the WebSocket implementation, some improvements that we wanted to Cascade to have, created a plan for migration. And these are just simplifying sort of where I can go back to. And right here, let's say that we don't like this implementation that Cascade has given out for improving the WebSocket. So we can go back to, let's say, this is where we explored some WebSocket improvements. And let's go back to that step where Cascade was putting out some WebSocket improvements. So I can go right into here and I can scroll to this and I can see all the different improvements that Cascade had put out before. If I want to directly revert to this step, I can also go right in here and okay, well, I can revert right here. You can also go right here and hit revert as well if you haven't scrolled to it, but you can hit revert. And one thing I do want to note is when you're reverting, within these checkpoints and reverting in general, you're going to be able to prompt to see sort of what changes were made since that revert. So we can hit confirm and Cascade will then be able to revert back to this prompt and we can sort of explore different options that we have to give Cascade. So those are a lot of the Wave 11 features that we released within the Windsurf IDE. One thing I do want to note as well is that we've released a bunch of new features for the JetBrains plugin as well. Those included within those updates are planning mode. Like we said, we've seen a lot of great adoption with planning mode, and we wanted to make sure that our JetBrains users have access to that as well. We've also now they've got access to workflows, voice mode, which we just released in tandem with our Windsurf IDE, and also file-based rules as well. And something we want to talk about there is just that, of course, there is some lag behind the features that we release within our JetBrains plugins, but we do want to note that we are working to improve the features that we have on JetBrains as well, and making sure that the gap between the Windsurf IDE and the JetBrains is not that big. And that's sort of what a lot of these improvements that we released with Wave 11 within the JetBrains IDE targets. And one thing I do want to note is sort of that feature of workflows. This was released in Wave 8, so it's been a while, but I do want to mention that how to access them. And the whole point of workflows is you can see right here in customizations, we can go to workflows and we can see the different workflows that we have. These are going to be found within your .windsurf file within your repository, and they are just markdown files, but you can see that the whole purpose of a workflow is that once you've found a process that you want replicated, that you've worked with Cascade to get through a few times, and you see that it's working, you should create a workflow. And the whole point of this is then you can now sort of automate this whole process. Right here, a great example of a use case for a workflow is going to be right here, where you have this series of sort of prompts that you want to give Cascade so that it's able to commit these changes. And now I've sort of automated this entire process to commit the changes that I've just made. And to run these, just to remind everyone, all you need to do is hit / and find the workflow that you have and just run it. Great. So these are just some of the changes that we've made within Wave 11. We'll let Cascade go ahead and sort of run this out. But I do want to note that we want to emphasize that even with all the news that's going on and what's been happening with cognition, we want to emphasize that we will keep shipping features. We've just released so many features within Wave 11, and we want everyone to know that we're going to continue improving on the Windsurf product and making it the best IDE out there. And with that, I will open it up to Q&A.
Yeah, Andrew, while you are showing your screen, there is a question about someone asked global workflows would be really nice to see. It seems that project specific is good, but do we have something like that in Windsurf?
Yeah, with Wave 11, actually, this is one of the other features. There's so many features we couldn't even get to all of them, but we release global workflows as well. These are going to be found similarly to where your global rules files are going to be found, but it's stored locally on your machine so that this is a workflow that you'll have within or globally, I would say. But yeah, that is a feature that we've shipped with Wave 11 as well.
Yeah, and Gina, a question for you. Can we ask Cascade to fix errors from the console?
Uh, sorry.
From the browser console, yeah.
Okay, yeah, so definitely. Cascade has access to your console log, so meaning whatever gets output there, Cascade can directly access and have that information. And combined with Cascade's own reasoning, or the model's reasoning capabilities and then fixing capabilities, it's able to combine that information, go into your code base, and actually fix the error itself. So definitely.
For sure, yeah. Andrew, do you so there's a question about it would be helpful if speech was shown real time. Do you want to answer that question about why we don't do that?
I think you can take that one.
Yeah, of course. So the reason we don't do that is because as you're speaking in voice, right, we actually process and polish the what you say essentially, right? Once you're done and once you press stop, because at the end of the day, like a lot of times speech to text is not 100% correct. So we have an LLM that processes that text once you are done speaking, and it makes any corrections that also allows the LLM to better understand what you were saying, right? And so that's why we don't showcase it real time. And yeah, I can see why that would be nice, but the purpose here is to make it clear to the LLM what your intention is. And so that's why we do some of that cleanup and polish once you're done speaking.
Yeah, one thing I note there is sort of an example that I did. Like I had a lot of sort of trailing words where I spent some time thinking, and if there was sort of that live release of the text I'm saying, it's very possible that that's not actually the best prompt to give Cascade. So that is why we run that and not have it run live.
For sure, yeah. Someone's asking if we have any best practices, or if either of you would like to talk about when to choose certain models versus others. So someone said, Andrew, you use Claude Sonnet 4 versus Sui 1. So when would you use a model like Sonnet 4 versus Sui 1, or models in general in Windsurf?
Yeah, I can take that one. I think generally I would say with model selection, it really is like sort of personal preference, and we I want to preface all of this by saying, like, you should go out and sort of figure out what works for you best. Look at the use cases that you have, run the models on those use cases, and see over time what works for you. Personally, I think my take on this is that for a lot of the more complex tasks that I'm running, I'm going to use some of the more frontier models like Claude Sonnet 4, ChatGPT o3, and have sort of those more complex models, slightly more expensive as well, but those more complex models being able to go ahead and complete these complex tasks. Of course, when I have simpler fixes, maybe a quick fix, I would then choose some of the smaller models, um, also cheaper models, but you have something like your SWE 1 or GPT 4.1, some of those, or even Sonnet 3.5, but those models that are going to be able to handle those smaller tasks a little better.
Great. Yep. Agree with you there. Someone's asking, and Andrew, you actually might have talked about this. Does starting a new chat destroy the context achieved over the last chat? And is there a workaround for this in Windsurf?
Yeah, I think a perfect example of sort of why we wanted to more explicitly have a feature for this is at mentioning conversations. We had talked about this before, but this is one of the new features that we released where you can now at mention one of the conversations you had before. Of course, and there you do have to have that initial conversation in order to mention it. But this can happen. Let's say you had a conversation 3 days ago and you now want to go back to it. You can now just start a new conversation, mention that conversation you had a few days ago, and be able to pull in the context from there.
For sure. Yeah. And then one thing to add on to there is that you can actually start, Andrew might have shown this, but you can start your a new chat with history, right? So that maintains the context from the previous work you've been doing. Gina, a question for you. Will MCP server support come to the IntelliJ plugin, or is it already there?
Yes, so definitely we plan on bringing most of the features to the IntelliJ, the suite of the JetBrains. So definitely we are planning on support that, and I think Ishan could have a few takes there too.
Yeah, for sure. JetBrains editors already have MCP support. Again, the only products that have MCP support in our product suite are the Windsurf editor and Cascade on JetBrains. All of our other Windsurf plugins do not have MCP support, and they also don't have that agent mode that you saw Gina and Andrew show. Another question is about just MCP in general. Does Gina and Andrew, do you want to answer, either of you want to say what is, I think a lot of people may not be aware of what MCP is. So Gina, you showed, MCP live, but can you just touch on what it really does or what it really is?
Yeah, of course. So MCP basically stands for Model Context Protocol, and it's a protocol that is recently developed for our models and our agents so that it can pull in external context. And not only can it pull in external context, for example, like pulling in your Figma design, your GitHub information, sorts of that, it can also conduct external actions like you just saw that I connected to the Atlassian MCP server. So for that action, I can actually tell Cascade to move my ticket to completed now that I've already done with it. So things like that, it can do very naturally with you not leaving the IDE itself.
For sure. Yeah. Andrew, someone's asking about planning mode. Could you kind of go over when to use planning mode, when not to, or what tasks? Someone's concerned about the latency that it takes when planning mode is enabled.
Yeah, 100%. As you can see, when I ran planning mode, it does take some extra time because as it runs those steps, you'll see Cascade be able to iterate upon the plan and sort of note down whatever context it's taking in. Also be able to note down sort of on that task list, it's going to check off every single task as it's being completed. Of course, that requires planning mode to be running and some more latency. So I would note that when you're sort of having those more long drawn out tasks where maybe you do want Cascade to sort of have more autonomy, I would say use planning mode to start and be able to look at that plan. I would say with tasks that are smaller and sort of these quick fixes, I would say you don't have to really implement or toggle on planning mode. But yeah, generally I would say just as more complex as a task gets, use planning mode. For something simpler, just you don't need to use planning mode. But I will note that if you see something failing without using planning mode, maybe try out planning mode and sort of iterate through that plan with Cascade so that it knows exactly what you want it to do. And then you can see if Cascade will be able to go through and complete that for you.
Yeah, perfect. Someone's asking about scheduling a workflow, and I'll just like to touch on this just briefly. In workflows, for those who haven't seen, there's a customizations bar, right? In the customizations, you can add rules, workflows, and you can see the auto-generated memories. In workflows themselves, you can also invoke a workflow through the workflow. So as it's operating on those different steps in the workflow, Cascade can determine whether or not to actually invoke that workflow if you specify that in the workflow that it's already operating in. So I would say you can't really schedule it, but you can kind of work around that and put it in certain rules or put it in certain workflows that you already have defined on when to use certain workflows. So hopefully that helps there. Does anyone want to answer? So someone's asking in general about context. What are the things that are always maintained and kept in context? Okay, so the things that are really kept in context, right, in Windsurf are, first of all, the explicit knowledge, right, which is your code base. Okay, the second thing is the implicit trajectory, which is you as a user, the actions that you've taken in the past, the lines of code that you've edited, the files that you've had open, the recent files that you've edited. All those things are added into the context window in addition to the chat history and some other things as well, right, like system prompts. All of those are always added into context. And so you can imagine that Windsurf, a lot of times it's not just looking at what is explicitly there in your code base, which is that ground source of truth, but it also is trying to understand how to be most useful to you by looking at your past history, right? Which is how we're able to get that ability to predict that next move for you, right? Okay. Someone's asking, is context lost when you switch models within a chat? Does anybody want to answer that?
When you switch models, the Cascade will still be able to pull in the sort of the context that's taken within that conversation already, and won't sort of lose any of that context as you continue the conversation within Cascade.
Yeah, for sure. Someone is asking, I've had a couple questions about, do we use Windsurf to build Windsurf? Yes, 100%. We fully use Windsurf to build Windsurf and the other products that we have, our plugins as well. Okay, Tage, do we have additional time or did we want to wrap up?
I think we're good to wrap up.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, everyone. This was an extremely fun session. Thanks, Gina, Andrew, and Tage. And I hope this was all extremely helpful. Stay tuned for more webinars. And there's a lot of more exciting things coming soon. We are not done shipping. We are only going to improve on the product from here and really, really help bring the best experience to our users. So stay tuned and make sure you are constantly updating your IDE whenever you see that little button. There will be a lot of cool things in the pipeline.
Also, just one thing, for people asking for recording, I'm going to reach out right after the webinar with a on email, and you can also find this on our YouTube channel. So
all right, everyone.
awesome. See you guys.
Thank you.